Welcome, everyone. Services for Louis Kimmel will be officiated by Rabbi Brent Gutman from TBZ Zion. Thank you.
Kol omer kra v'amar ma'ekra. Kol habasar chatzir v'chol chasdo ketzitz hasadeh. Yavesh chatzir navel tzitz ki ruach Adonai nafsha bo. A voice says, cry out, and I say, what shall I cry? Our friends grieve. A precious remembrance for all these and more. We give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that bring us the ever-new message of God's nearness. They tell us of our kinship with the Creator in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach be'atzat rasha'im u'v'derech hata'im lo amad. Happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked or taken the path of sinners or joined the company of the insolent. God is their delight. And they study that teaching day and night. They are like a tree planted beside streams of water that yields its fruit in season, whose foliage never fades and whose fruit always flourishes. V'alehu lo yibol v'chol asher ya'aseh yatzliach. Adonai mi yagor ba'olecha mi yishkon b'char kodshecha. Adonai. Yeshovev. Yanchengini b'magle tzedek leman shemo kam ki helech.
Lou. Most people in this room know the kind of person Lou Kimmel was. Loving, bright, witty, cooler than the other side of the pillow. I've been reflecting these past few days on how to best describe Lou Kimmel to those who didn't know him. Not an easy task. To say he was one of the best men I've ever known simply wouldn't do him justice. Sure, it would hold up, but probably a bit too cliche. And every person feel they're the most important person in the room. No agenda, it's just who he was. He genuinely cared about everyone there. In 24 years, I became well accustomed to people letting me know how much they love my grandpa. The list is endless. His neighbors, the maitre d' at Hutch's, the cashier at Wegmans, the team at Bagel J's, the staff at Canterbury Woods, the list goes on. In the same way young parents get bombarded about the cuteness of their newborn, I would get bombarded with praise for my grandpa. It never got old, and I was so proud to call him my grandfather. Papi Lou had an uncanny ability to spread warmth, regardless. If you ask him, it was all perfect. Where most people would see gray skies and freezing temperatures, Papi Lou would see a Even my mom and Marcy are now offended by the slightest Josh Allen slander. People always ask me about the origins of my fandom and often question why it means so much to me. The simple reply is that my dad's from Buffalo, sure, but it goes way deeper than that. The real answer is that the Bills put
speeches last night, and we were looking at each other because both of our speeches had a lot of overlap with each other, and that wasn't that we were plagiarizing, it just is that we had very similar feelings about Poppy Lou, so that's a little precursor there. So I've always loved talking about my grandfather, Poppy Lou. Being able to give a speech at his 80th birthday party as an 8-year-old was one of my earliest opportunities to show Poppy how much he meant to both his family and his friends. And I was lucky enough to give a similar speech at his surprise 90th birthday party just a few years ago. While the speeches were separated by a decade, I could have easily recycled my original speech, maybe fixed a few grammatical errors, because Poppy Lou was a legend at 80, and he was even more of a legend at 90. Whenever I would come to Buffalo or Florida, one of the most pleasurable experiences for me was being able to hear how much everyone loved and appreciated the kindness that he radiated each and every day. Whether it be the staff at Bagel J's or the Bagel Cove in Florida, new sidekick from the end of his life, his beloved Shelley, Poppy Lou had a knack for making everyone in a room feel loved and appreciated. Very few people have a level of attachment to a city like Poppy Lou had with the city of Buffalo. As he frequently described to his family or anyone he would come across on a daily basis, he was in a true love affair with the city. As my grandfather's health declined over the last several weeks, I spent a lot of time thinking about the man Poppy Lou was, and I eventually came to a realization about his relationship with the city. Sure, there are Wings, our beloved Bills, and the simple yet historic red-bricked house he spent most of his years in. But I think Poppy Lou felt like he owed a lot to Buffalo. Buffalo provided him with the love of his life, my Grammy Charlotte. Was Lou Kimmel. We are all given different titles throughout our lives. As a 22-year-old, I know I'll hold numerous titles throughout my life, whether it be for a job or within my family. Although, I am confident of one thing. There will never be a title that I will be prouder to bear than being the grandson of Lou Kimmel. Whenever we gathered as a family with Poppy Lou, he famously would ask us in his playful yet majestic voice, "How do you like it so far?" Well, if Poppy could see all the people in this room that gathered to celebrate his beautiful life he lived, I don't think it could get much better for him.
Scott, we welcome you to come share remarks with us.
Wow, those are two tough acts to follow. Guys, unbelievable. I guess I'd start by saying my dad is probably the only 94-year-old that when you told people that he passed away, they were shocked. He's a true force of nature. I feel a lot of pressure being up here today speaking about him. My dad had a pretty normal, happy upbringing with his parents and his sister Lillian on Tremore Avenue. He was single until his 30s. He actually had some pretty wild times with his pals. He told me a few of them. I don't think anyone would want to hear that right now. Kind of acted like you kids did in college. But he lived with his parents till he was married, which mostly worked out. Except he did tell me a story once that he was out very late one night and he came back and the door was chained. And he kicked it in, went in and went to sleep. I was like, "What did your parents do?" He said, "I woke up the next morning, the door was fixed, they said nothing." So, my dad wanted to use his oratory skills to become a lawyer, but his father had a heart attack and he had to take over the family jewelry business. Not his dream, gave him a good life. He met my mom, Charlotte, and their courtship was the stuff of legend. Little known fact, as a sweet old man, but Noel can attest to him being a little tough growing up. He liked things the way he liked them and was, as we say, a little strong-willed and set in his ways. Hard to believe, I know. Handed to him marching down the street defiantly in his suit and wingtips as we drove off. I didn't know what was going on, but he did make it home. I'm just telling you a couple of sort of bad stories, but it's going to end good, don't worry. He got in an argument once with a member of his country club, I think over a gin game. The guy said to him, you know, if we were younger, they were probably in their late 60s at the time, I would ask you to step out in the parking lot. My dad rolled up his sleeves and shouted, let's go. Off they went, but of course, cooler heads prevailed. And he would get annoyed with Noel and I on occasion, but I'm sure we tortured him a little bit when we were kids. He hated beards, any kind of facial hair, and I once had a pretty good beard, and I even had a ponytail, believe it or not. The ponytail drove him nuts, but the earring that I once had caused him to give me the silent treatment for 2 weeks until I took it out. But really, he was really loving to us, and he would always melt with a smile and an apology if we screwed up. I think a lot has been said about the Bills, his love for the Bills, so I won't talk too much about that. But I will mention that one season, when they were not so good in the early days, he booed so much that he developed polyps on his throat, requiring surgery. And he had to communicate on a notepad for a week. And as he told people proudly, when the Bills lost the first Super Bowl, there was Buffalo being the amazing city it was. They had a parade, and they let Scott Norwood talk, and they cheered him. My dad claims that he booed Norwood. I don't know. I understand, by the way. But generally, he was a really loyal fan, and he watched the games to the very end, even with his buddy Al Coppola in the hospital. But thinking about my dad and his stubborn streak, that's what made him special, and that's what got him to 94. He did it his way, his automobile, until 6 weeks ago. He needed his wheels, his independence. He loved the ritual of going to Wegmans to buy his newspaper and one banana. I begged him not to go to the world's biggest supermarket when he could barely climb up on the bar stool, even to this year. And the people he met at the bars in Buffalo and Florida, he did tell me one story. He met these Irish guys who were like some sort of a soccer team in Florida on St. Patrick's Day, and my dad, especially his grandchildren, he loved them collectively and individually. He got to know each of them. I believe it. Believe it. By hallucinating, and I went in, and he was saying his prayers, which he said every night, which I remember. And I never met a tougher, stronger person in my life. My mom died 15 years ago. He loved her deeply. He made up his mind never to fall in love again because he only had one love. He had a lot of companionship, but there was no replacing my mom. It was a lonely path, but he soldiered on without complaint. And he lived a rich, full life, filling it with family, friends, food, drink, cards, a lot of stuff. When I'm annoyed, when I'm kvetching, when I'm blue, I'll think of my dad and his outlook, and I'll try to be like him. If I can be half the guy he was, I'm doing okay. Dad, you were just a little guy from Tremor Avenue, but you made a huge impact on this world.
That was beautiful. We welcome Noel to share words.
I didn't realize I was going to have to bat cleanup today. All beautiful words and, hopefully not too much repetition. Born on the 4th of July, died on Super Bowl Sunday, and buried on Valentine's Day. This was a guy who loved his celebrations. He seriously used to think that the fireworks on the 4th were for his birthday every year. My dad led a long and rich life, full of great times and lasting memories, with family and oh so many friends. In speaking to many of his and our, how uniquely he touched so many people's lives and left such an indelible impression. Most notably, Scott and I, Pam and Marcy, his beloved Charlotte, and his delightful grand for the last quarter of a century. Once they came into the picture, the grand the list goes on and on. He would talk to anyone, tell his story, and show genuine interest in theirs. As a kid, I have to admit this could be a bit embarrassing. As we grew older, less so. Scott and I became accustomed to his very consistent, oft-repeated introduction, my son from New York. This made a lot of sense because his own introduction was always the same. For as long as I can remember, he'd put out his right hand, give a firm handshake, and say, Lou Kimmel, Buffalo, New York, all the time. I remember a story, Scott's graduation from Georgetown, bench in the quad, taking a break from the ceremony. John Thompson, the legendary Hoyas coach, walked by. And this was really during the heyday of Georgetown basketball. My dad was 5'7", maybe 5'8" tops, the coach 6'11" or taller. My dad sprung up, buttoned the top button of his blazer, stuck out his hand and said, Coach Thompson, Lou Kimmel, Buffalo, New York. And I'm sure he made an impression on the coach too. Pam's introduction to the family, and vice versa, was not unremarkable and definitely had some moments. We can leave out for now the story where Scott lost her going running in Cape Cod right after we got engaged, but trust me, there's a lot of material there. For my wife, who grew up on Sutton Place, marrying a guy from traveled here frequently on business, more than I did, and when she stayed at my parents' home, they'd leave mom restaurants, often the same table, sometimes the Kimmel table at his favorite haunts, same hotels, perhaps the same room. I could go on and on. He loved the special treatment, the familiarity. He was a man of many sayings, which he often repeated. While that repetition could be a bit annoying when we were kids, they captured many of the things he held so important in life. Here are a few, already taken by one of my sons. How do you like it so far? A frequently repeated phrase on a trip, out to dinner, at a ball game, and his desire that everyone should be enjoying themselves as much as he was. Marriage to his Charlotte or Sharzy, but the occasional tiff could arise. Never anything serious or long-lasting, but his wise marital advice I'll remember to this day, which he would instruct us or others. Peace at any cost, boys. Golf was one of his favorite pastimes, and he didn't take it up until he was in his 50s, and he wasn't very good. I didn't understand then, but I do now. He would come home from the club and report his score to us or to his friends and say, legitimate on my own ball, as if to proudly state the authenticity of his score to all. Now I understand this comment. and an all-time favorite of mine, which captured so much of who he was and how he lived his life. Show me who your friends are, and I'll show you who you are.
Sorry, I forgot to mention one thing in my speech, so I'm going to introduce Shelley. Shelley has taken care of my dad for a couple of years and been his friend and companion and lifeline, so she wanted to say a few words.
Well, I was his eyes, I was his ears, I was his hand to help him get around, and he had such a strong grip on me. I remember every time I'd walk him into a store, my arm would hurt after, because he literally would just put all of his weight on me because he knew that I wouldn't let him go. We went out to eat all the time. Generous man I've ever met in my entire life. He knew my kids. He treated my kids like his grandkids. He would take my kids out to lunch. I mean, it was just not your typical situation. But breakfast was the main thing. He loved his breakfast. So at one restaurant we went out, I think it was maybe the first time, and I got an Eggs Benedict, which I love. And he was like, oh, that's Charlotte's favorite. He's like, but I've never had it. And I was like, well, then I think you need to get it. So he did, and he was like, this is delicious. He's like, I would never eat it for my Charlotte. Charlotte.
So hi everybody, I'm Sandy Prezant, I'm Uncle Lou's nephew. Charlotte was my dad's sister, Alan's sister. And I was the 14-year-old, 13-year-old having Uncle Lou as my role model. And he would have been so proud of he would have been so proud of the way you guys sent him off. So just a few things to remember. He played and your mom also. He just really was something special. And I think he changed. Remember how tough he was? He really changed and became a force of light instead of the light in the room, the only light. You know, he was the leader of the pack. And really, he was the first person I ever knew that had a subscription to Playboy, which endeared me to your house as a child. He got it for the articles, like I did. Yeah. So, and I think Uncle Lou would be the proudest of the man that he became as he grew older and older. He really was a force of light and goodness, and we're all going to miss him.
Sandy, Shelley, Nolan, Scott, Jared, and Ethan, we're so privileged, as I mentioned before we started this, to hear your remarks and to hear this account of your poppy, your father, your uncle, your friend who gave you so much in life. And as we've heard beautifully, I think did. You know, Lou had a tremendous laugh and tremendous smile, and whenever he came to the room, he would bring a smile to the face of whoever he greeted. He was altogether decent and hardworking, strong and loyal, especially as we heard to the Buffalo Bills, go Bills. As I heard these descriptions, I was reminded of any number of teachings from our rabbis on interpersonal behavior. They included exhortations like, let the honor of your friend be as dear to you as your own, and be not easily provoked to anger. Judge every man towards merit, and greet everyone with a warm, cheerful, and pleasant countenance. And we could go on in all the ways that Louis was the epitome of decency. You described your father's presence like that of the mayor, his personality, knowing how to greet everyone, always attuned to what was going on around him. And he exhibited resilience in the face of tragedy, as we heard that he was in the middle of pursuing his law degree when his father died and dutifully took over the family's jewelry. Knew him genuinely felt his zeal for life. He was tremendously fun. He had a great laugh, enjoyed practical humor, was not afraid to be self-deprecating, to draw out the laughter of others, played gin rummy with a regular group of friends, and, as we heard, a devoted season ticket holder from the very start. He indulged when the crop of sweet corn came ripe every summer, and he kept connections with his family strong as he regularly visited them in Massachusetts, California, Ohio, and other locales. He encouraged everyone that they should always travel for simchas, for happy occasions, as he led by example. He loved his daughters-in-law, Dana, Pam, and Marcy. And Pam, we've heard about your connection already and how much they sought to welcome you with the mints on the pillow complete. Scott, you shared a video of him boogieing on the dance floor as you and Marcy connected just a few years ago. And I mentioned that when you party like that, especially at that age, we of course pictured from the occasion holding aloft his choice drink, straight vodka. David, Lily, Ethan, and Jared, Shelley, and Sandy, we know we include you. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Amatzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Gzor Arakim Asirim, and Nishmat Label ben Jacob, Charlotte Shalach Lolamo, Bal Rachamim Yastirehu, Besedek Nafav Lolamim, Vitzro Bitzro Hachaim et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nechalato. V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Louis S. Kimmel, Buffalo, New York, known among our people as Label ben Yaakov, the Charlotte, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.